We start lesson 5 of chapter 2. You need a refresher course on combining like terms and distributive property. Hopefully this jogs your memory and you are feeling good about these two items by the end of this lesson. All right, let's get after it. So we've got an algebraic expression for number 1, negative 4x plus 5x. What we need to do is we need to break it up into terms. Okay, identify the terms. So we have negative 4x plus 5x. They are like terms because they both have x. They have the same exact matching variable. So when we combine those, we can kind of ignore the x's and just look at negative 4 plus 5. Negative 4 plus 5 is 1. So now we bring the x back in and we get 1x. All right, that is number 1. Let's move on to number 5. All right, you can write these down and then use these to help you do the rest. Now, we're going to break this up into terms. I'm going to use different shapes for these terms to indicate that help show the like terms. Okay, now the next term would be minus 8. I'm going to circle that one because it doesn't have an x like my first term. But this next one does, so I'm going to use the rectangle again. And then the last one is a plus 2. I'm going to use a circle to show that it's not a like term. So I'm going to combine the boxes. That's negative 2x minus 7x. All right? So that's going to be negative 9x. Okay, there's this word that I like to throw around a lot, simplify. Okay, it's just saying something in a simpler way, right? If I could give you directions with only one step instead of giving you directions that had 2 steps, but accomplish the same thing, wouldn't I do that? That's simplifying, right? If I said, go ahead and walk 2 steps. No, now go walk 7 more steps. Why didn't I just say walk 9 in the first place? All right, well, that's what we're getting at. This says the negative or the subtraction sign, that's a direction to walk. And then the number is how many steps you're going to take. So like the negative 2, it's like telling you to go left 2 and then left 7. Well, why don't we just say left 9? That's a more simple way to say it. All right. So then let's look at the other like terms. We call these constants. They don't vary. They don't have a variable. So they're called constants. We have minus 8 and plus 2. Well, if I said, hey, real quick, go out the door, go to the left 8 classrooms. Wait, then turn around and come back 2 classrooms. Wouldn't that be the same, kind of the same as saying why don't you just say go left 6 classrooms in the first place? Okay, so we are simplifying or just thinking negative 8 plus 2. Negative 8 plus 2. All right. The next one I want to go over is number 9. And the reason is if a variable term does not have a coefficient, so this guy here doesn't have a coefficient, what do we put there? We slide a 1 in there. All right, so now we have a 2k, and we're going to subtract 1k. 2k minus 1k, that leaves us with 1k, or because identity property says 1 times anything is that number. Well, 1 times k is k. You can write that. All right, so that should be enough for you to finish 1 through 12. Now, let's review distributive property. Distributive property, you can tell we have distributive property when you have a number out front of parentheses, and inside the parentheses there's 2 or more terms that are being added or subtracted. Okay, so all of these are examples of distributive property. This 3 outside is going to multiply by all the terms inside the parentheses. So 3 times negative 7 would be negative 21. And then 3 times a minus 8n. Minus 8n would be minus 24n. All right, that's it. It's that simple. We take the outer factor and multiply it by both of the inner terms. Now we slide a 1 in here, so that's 1r. So 8 times 1r is going to be 8r. And 8 times plus 1 is going to be plus 8. Oops, I did one extra that I wasn't planning on doing. That's okay. Number 17, we're going to distribute the 2. And we're going to find that 2 times 6n is 12n. And 2 times a minus 8 is going to be minus 16. Next, this one's a little different. You might want to star it. That's a terrible star. All right, we have a problem with a negative number being distributed. So we're going to do a negative times 8, negative 5 times 8v. That gives us negative 40v. If we were to distribute it to here, what's going to happen here? So we have a negative and a subtraction. When you multiply a negative times a term that's being subtracted, it actually turns to addition. A negative times a negative is a positive. So that's adding 10, since 5 times 2 is 10. One other way you can think about it is if you turn the subtraction into adding the opposite, right? We know that subtraction is the same as adding the opposite. Then you could see that, okay, there's my plus sign, and then when I do a negative times a negative, I get a positive 10. All right, so a couple ways to think about that. All right, but the idea is 2 negatives makes a positive. So let's do this next one. Now, I did this one on purpose because I saw this negative hanging out there by itself, so I want to put in a negative 1 times 3a minus 3, right? All I did was I put a 1 there. Okay, when you're multiplying by just a negative sign, you can just think of it as multiplying by negative 1. Distribute that, negative 1 there, and take it to that as well. So negative 1 times 3a is going to be negative 3a. And again, we have this situation where we have a negative, we have a minus. Well, it's like taking away negatives. It's taking away losses. If I took away losses, then that means, that's good, right? If you take away the losses from your schedule, your football schedule or your soccer schedule, take away all those losses, well, that makes you look better or more positive. So a negative times a minus is going to be plus, and then we got 1 times 3, which is 3. All right, the other way to think about it is just to say, okay, whenever there's subtraction, I can change it to adding the opposite. If I change it to adding the opposite, then when I when I multiply that by that negative 1, right? When I multiply by that negative 1, it's a negative times a negative, which becomes a positive 3 here. All right, so a couple different ways to think about it. All right, moving on to the last section where we combine the two things we just learned. We're going to distribute and then combine like terms. Distribute and then combine like terms. Now, we know that multiplication comes before addition and subtraction in order of operations. So we're going to always distribute, because that's multiplication right there, before we add. Inside these parentheses, you might be thinking, well, don't we do inside the parentheses first? Well, yeah, but you can't do this because n plus 1, they're not like terms, so we can't do that. But we can distribute that 4 to the n and that 4 to the 1. So we get negative n, or negative 1n, plus, that I would slide a 1 there. 4 times 1n is 4n, and we have plus the 4 times the 1 is 4. Time to look for our like terms. We've got a term there. This is like, so I'll give it the same shape, and this is not like, so I'll give it a different shape. We got negative 1n plus 4n, that's 3n, and we just bring the unlike term, the constant in this case, along for the ride. Next problem, let's skip that one, let's go to this one. We've got a tempting thing to do would be to add those first, but we can't because addition doesn't come before multiplication. So we just bring that negative 4 along for the ride while we distribute that 6. Okay, the 6 times the negative 4 gives me a minus. Okay, we kind of have like a plus and a minus. When we multiply that, it becomes minus. 6 times 4 is going to be 24x. 6 times 3 is going to be 18. All right, now we're going to look at our like terms. Now that's a -4, then we have a minus 24x, and we have a plus 18. Notice how that negative or minus 24x is not the same shape as the other two. Since it has a variable, the other two don't. So now we're going to combine those guys without the variable. -4 and 18, and that's going to be 14. And then we're going to bring the negative 24x along for the ride, or the minus 24x along for the ride. All right, let's go to our final example. I'm going to rewrite this one just because I don't want to squeeze in all those negative ones.
If you're in the building,
spread it out nice and neat. All right, I'm going to distribute, and I do -1 times -1 is going to be 1n. -1 times a +2, different sign, so that's going to be -2, and bring the -2n along for the ride. Okay, we've got like terms now. That's a different guy. This is a like term. So 1n minus 2n's, that's going to be -1n, and we bring the -2 along for the ride. There we have it. Good luck. Could be challenging. I know signs can be frustrating, but you can do it. Good luck.